Welcome to Anchor Point. Today, I'd like to welcome Caroline Bald from the University of Essex. She is a social worker and she's also part of the Heads Together Brain Injury Research Team, where we've been working on how to improve social work outcomes for people with brain injuries and their families. Welcome, Caroline. Okay, so question number one, why is social work important after brain injury?
Social work is important after brain injury because social work can act like the glue between different aspects of what happens after brain injury. It's one of those professions where everything and anything can be part of a social worker's role, including from assessment to planning to reviewing to listening, but also to fetching, helping. It's a very practical profession, but at the same time, it's a very stretched profession. So social work, because it can do so much, can be seen as a gap when it's not there.
Yeah, thank you. So question number two, how in your mind does brain injury affect family members?
In my view, brain injury affects family members potentially all the more because you're not the one that's experienced it and going through it. That's not to suggest there's a hierarchy of who's affected more, but being on the periphery, even if you are spending every day with that person, can be incredibly challenging as that person comes to understand their own changes, but their own crisis. So I think it's very similar to other crises. But brain injury, I think, is a particularly challenging part for family members simply because so few people truly understand it. So it adds that whole extra layer of potentially isolation, embarrassment, fear, loss, grief,
Yeah.
but also that never-ending sense of when's this going to stop?
Yeah.
And as everybody's growing and living, things change naturally, but I think brain injury just adds a bookmark in people's lives, and there's before and after sometimes that can create such a big divide and a real challenge to families and everyone in that family playing their own individual roles as part of a family, which isn't always the simplest of beasts. So you add an extra brain injury level, it just can create a glue that can also keep people stuck. So it's very challenging.
So then moving on to the final question, bearing in mind everything that you just said, how could social work do more to make a difference for families?
Certainly from the work that we've been doing with Heads Together, one of the basic things we've recognised is there's a need for specific training around brain injury. And in that, we're very concerned to make sure that that is also about how to work with families. And it's not uncommon for families to almost be the home social worker, if you like, because they're the person that are there 24/7. They're the person that's there at 5 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. And yet somehow we learn about the organic impact of brain injury. We don't necessarily think about things longer term. So social workers can be better placed to help, even simply by listening, but also recognising the challenges that are there, being consistent. And there's certainly lessons to be learned from a structural perspective about the transfer of cases all too often. From the point of crisis to the point of challenge, often it becomes you get pushed between different teams, and people also then not recognising that what comes with brain injury can also be everything else that makes someone a human. So it's that whole idea of from social work how we can do better with families is A, get a better understanding of brain injury, but B, also perhaps really address our structural building in inequalities where people maybe don't sit neatly into different teams. So that's certainly something that I'm interested in terms of more of a holistic social work practice.
Okay, thank you. It's an important topic, and thank you, because you gave a really thorough and really important answer to that. Thank you so much, Caroline, for joining me today. Thank you everyone out there for listening and watching this today as well. Thank you.
Thank you.